Hi, I'm Charlotte Cagny, and today we are welcoming Dr. Rebecca Moore, who is a perinatal psychiatrist working in birth trauma. And so welcome today, and thank you for coming.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Yeah, I know you have a lot of experience working with women, and tell me, how did your passion and interest start that you got into this field?
So when I was training as a psychiatrist, I was really lucky. In one of my very first jobs, actually, I worked with somebody who really was just setting up perinatal psychiatry in the UK. And she was so passionate about it that it rubbed off on me, essentially. And it just felt to me like preventative medicine at its best, really, because not only were you affecting the outcome for that woman, but you're affecting the outcome for her child as well. So, it just felt so important as a piece of work to be supporting women into their transition in motherhood, really. And so I've just done, worked in that field now for a long time, and I still love it, still really passionate about it. And it's just the most privileged job, really, to be involved with somebody through their pregnancy, and sometimes with women with second, third, fourth pregnancies. So to see their whole family grow is just a really lovely job to have.
What do you find the most rewarding about it?
I think because women in the perinatal period can get really unwell from a sort of mental health perspective, but they can also get well really quickly if they've got expert care and assessment. So I think it's a sense of, really supporting women to remain emotionally well through pregnancy and in early motherhood, but also it's just always a privilege to hear people's stories. People are endlessly fascinating. Everyone's so unique, and you get the chance to really know people. So, you might have worked with somebody from when they were 4 or 5 weeks pregnant to up to a year postnatally. So you really become a part of that person's journey at that time, and that's just really special.
I think it's special to have that support with someone you know for a long time like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think continuity of care, comes out in all the literature about something that makes a difference between whether something feels traumatic or not. So having had, built that relationship, I think is really, really important. And it's just, lovely to have worked with somebody when they're pregnant, and then to get to meet their baby, and then, to be involved as they're starting that journey to motherhood as well, is just a really lovely period of someone's life to work with them.
Yeah. What do you see as the main challenges facing women who want to have a confident birth and then they're just not feeling confident in the beginning?
After birth or during pregnancy?
Before first and then, or
I mean, I think one of the issues that comes up in terms of when women have had a difficult birth experience is about how we provide antenatal education to women. And what's happened probably in most NHS-based services is that has become less and less and less. So sometimes people might only have 1, 2, or 3 antenatal sessions before baby arrives. And those are often in large groups. And I think that, plus perhaps not having a named midwife or somebody that goes with you all the way through that journey, can mean that for a lot of women, they come to birth not really feeling that prepared for it. And I think what can happen sometimes, the difficulties for women is they haven't perhaps an expectation that birth can be one way, which is completely understandable, because they haven't really had a whole discussion about how unpredictable birth might be. So when things change in labour, they find that very difficult, understandably, and feel, guilty that they weren't able to birth how they wanted, or feel a lack of confidence around that. So I think for me, the more we can educate women antenatally to feel really informed, to feel really empowered, to talk about all the narratives of birth, so not just home birth, not just hospital birth, but everything in between, I think helps women feel more control and more confident as they come towards their birth. I think the other thing is about involving partners. So often partners aren't able to get the time off work or aren't able to come to appointments. So I think, you know, it's the more we can involve partners as well, because sometimes in birth they need to advocate for mum if she's really tired or if she's in pain. So I think the more we can educate them as a family to be rather than just as a mum to be is also really, really important.
Yeah.
And I think that can really help with confidence around birth. I think postnatally, you know, I think we all struggle with confidence. I don't think there's any single one of us that at some point feels like we're not getting it wrong or not doing it right. And I think what can happen is you can get bombarded with lots of really well-meaning information, but that's all slightly different from lots of different people. And I think then that sometimes can feel even worse because you just don't know what to do. So again, it's something that I try and get women that I'm working with to think about antenatally, to have really drawn up a postnatal plan, because I think often we put so much focus on how birth is going to be, we actually forget then we're going to have a baby to look after and going to be really tired. So, you know, I try and get people to map out beforehand, you know, what might help you postnatally, who are the people that you really love that really make you feel safe and heard and bring you real joy. So book in to see them, you know, find out about what groups are on before you've had baby, not afterwards. Just a little bit more planning around how that postnatal period will be. And I think, you know, confidence is something that for all of us grows with time, because, you know, mothering is a new skill that we have to learn. Breastfeeding, or however you choose to feed, is a new skill that you need to learn. And I think that does take time. So I think not to be hard on yourself if you know, give yourself that space for things to grow. And that can include, you know, that feeling of love and bonding with baby. Not everybody has that initially, but it's something that can grow with time. So I think it's just about trying to be kind to ourselves and giving ourselves a space to learn how to mother like we would learn with anything else that was new.
I think kindness is a really big thing. I think we can be so hard, and maybe it's my experience for being hard on ourselves, or for wanting perfection and wanting to be the good mother. And it, like you said, and we are that already. And when that's, for me, that's what confidence, to know that you're okay and be kind to yourself. Yeah. Not instead of saying confidence means you must know it all already. And that's not really, that's what I think that people interpret confidence sometimes when they see something, oh, they've got it all together, they're confident, because you feel wobbles, you don't. But actually it's like for me it's the confidence to know I'm okay and I can get help and I'll learn it. And so I keep trying, and that's like a redefining in a kinder way.
Yeah, I think that's really, you know, and to, you know, have days to know that it will vary from minute to minute and hour to hour, day to day. And some days you have a really good day and it all seems to flow, and then the next day it's just terrible and, you know, it feels really overwhelming. But that is the nature of being a new mum. I think, you know, we don't have to get it right all of the time, or even most of the time. You know, most of the time we will be doing so much more than we recognize. And I think it's about, you know, thinking, sometimes we can think of all the things that we didn't quite do how we wanted to do, but we're not very good at saying, but you know what, actually I got up, I got dressed, the baby is fine. You know, that those are all massive achievements. And I think it's just about having to reframe that. It doesn't have to be big things. You know, when you're sleep deprived, even just getting up and getting dressed is brilliant, and it doesn't have to be anything more than that. So I think just, you know, to slow things down and to take the pressure off ourselves for a bit is really helpful. I mean, it's really hard to do, you know, but I think it's really, you just need to grow into being able to do that, really.
Yeah, it feels good when you do. I've had 3 children and I took the pressure off more and more, I think. And I know when I hear people that feel pressured to go to the shops or something, or to do things they did in their life before, but they've changed now. My mother, so it's
Mm.
take the
I
pressure.
mean, I think there's nothing nicer than, you know, having a day where you don't get dressed and you sit in your pajamas and you just hold baby and watch rubbish telly and eat cake. I mean, I think that should be
I think the baby'd really love it as well, just sitting with you, enjoying the simple things.
yeah, and I think days like that are really important because they foster that connection, and you know sometimes they can really help with feeding because you can just really promote that sort of skin to skin and contact. So I think, you know, the myth that we're suddenly all up looking immaculate going to loads of baby groups is not the reality for most people. Of course it's lovely to have a mix, and you know sometimes it can be really really helpful to get out of the house even if it's just 10 minutes walk in the fresh air and a little bit of light, but you know you don't have to be doing any of those things.
And you created the Make Birth Better campaign with Emma, your colleague Emma Svanberg. And what did you see happening, and what is that campaign about? I've talked a little bit about with Emma, but maybe it's good to
Yeah,
hear it from her.
sure. I suppose, you know, independently, myself and Emma, you know, because we are sitting with women week in, week out, what had become clear to me really was that, you know, I was working with women where perhaps they had a history of depression or a history of anxiety or psychosis. But when they came back to see me after having had their baby, actually what they really, really wanted to talk about and were distressed about was their birth. So just hearing lots and lots of stories from women about how difficult they were finding their birth and how traumatized they were feeling, and that nobody was really asking them, how was your birth? You know, tell me what happened for you. So women consequently feeling really alone. So we joined forces last year, and so Make Birth Better is a national collaborative of parents and professionals, and we're working to, you know, ideally we want to exist in a world where women shouldn't have to experience traumatic births because lots of the things that cause trauma can actually be prevented. And so we work by raising awareness, by training, by researching into birth trauma, and by campaigning so that people are aware of what birth trauma is. And I think it's, you know, it's really grown exponentially, which is good and obviously sad at the same time, because highlighting that there, you know, there are lots of people out there, and not just in the UK actually, from all around the world contacting us that are finding birth very, very difficult. And so, you know, we've been overwhelmed with, you know, stories and from people contacting us wanting to know how to get support and advice. And I think one of the things that we're really focused in is that actually we feel that a big part of the issue is that the systems which people come into to give birth are traumatized themselves. So we have people working in the NHS that are burnt out and fatigued, and then they're not able to provide the best care to that woman, and then you get this whole sort of vicious circle of trauma going on. So we've got lots of big sort of aims and things that we're working on in different levels to try and support mums and families after a difficult birth.
I like the way that you're working with the mums and the birth professionals, which
Yeah,
is, this summit's a bit like that as well, because I have birth professionals and mothers
yeah,
joining.
yeah.
Um, and I think it's like women together, ultimately, women together working for birth, which feels really good to me. You know,
Yeah,
it's
it's
women,
got to be.
life.
I think the, you know, I think what can happen within birth is that you can often get sort of very polarized views and camps. So you can have people that, you know, are very pro, say, a home birth, or people that are very pro a hospital birth. And sometimes what can happen is that, you know, understandably people are passionate about their views and beliefs, which are all valid, but instead of talking to each other, they can end up shouting at each other. And then I think for women in the middle, that can feel really scary and they can feel lost. You know, most of us in birth exist in sort of the grey. You know, we don't have one perfect thing happen or one awful thing happen. We have a mixture. of both. But I think what we really wanted at Make Birth Better was to be a platform for all voices and all views, and it's not that all of those are valid. And what we want is for women to be able to see the full range of birth, because there are 100 million different ways that people might choose or want or end up giving birth. And so we've been really careful to, you know, have lots and lots of stories that reflect how different birth can be, because I think that then comes back to that empowering women perhaps that are reading those stories that are pregnant, that they can see, gosh, look at all these different ways birth can happen, and you know, what might make me feel good if that happened for me. And it you know, it just gives a truer version of the million different ways that each woman experiences her birth. And it's been very, very respectful on, you know, on social media. People have, it's felt really good, because it's felt like it's given a safe space for people to talk about all the different experiences. And like you said, you know, women are absolutely at the heart of that. Everything we do is for women and with women. We don't want to be separate to that. You know, we want them to be at the heart of what we're doing and working for.
Yeah, I think given that kind of platform, women know what they want the support to achieve it. But inside somewhere, maybe they need permission to go for it, but we kind of know once we're given those options and choices and start to think about it. We have, and it's different for each person, but we have our own path, and we can, when we've got all that information and that support from people who are listening to us, we can find that path for us, each individual person. So I think that's really great.
I think it's also sometimes, you know, the beauty of say social media, for example. I mean, I know, you know, social media has many, many flaws, but I think in this kind of space, actually, a lot of women really, really like it, because they can be there anonymously. Nobody knows who they are, where they live, and they can come on and read all these stories in a way perhaps that they might not be able to ask somebody about in a conversation. But it gives them a platform to come on and be able to think about it in their own space and privately, which a lot of women, you know, I talk to say is really, really helpful. And also sort of postnatally, it can often be a space where women can find their voice. You know, they might never come and see me as a psychiatrist. It might feel too scary to do that, and that's completely fine. And we know that, you know, at least half of women with a perinatal mental illness never seek help. So if they can go and look online and give voice to what they're experiencing, know that they're not alone, that other people are experiencing the same things, and talk to people about what might be helpful to recover, then for me that's absolutely brilliant. Because you know, instead of sitting there suffering and struggling at home, there is a new forum for people to be able to seek support. So that's, you know, that's brilliant, because it's always about what works for you and what feels supportive.
I think the hardest step is seeking some kind of support sometimes, particularly when you're feeling depressed or you're feeling whatever it is you're feeling. That's the hardest step, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's really, I mean, I think it's hugely courageous to pluck up the courage to tell somebody how you're feeling. I mean, first of all, you might not even really know what's happening. Sometimes it's really hard to know, is this being a new mum? Is this because I'm really tired? So it can take a time to really recognize what's going on. And then I think, you know, underlying that for all women is a fear of, am I going to be judged then as a bad mum? Is somebody going to take my baby away from me? And I really want to say to women, you know, I completely understand why you would feel that way, but that is not what we are here for. Our whole remit is to keep families together and support families. But, you know, it can be really scary and difficult to pluck up the courage to tell somebody. And I think sometimes as a society, we need to do more to reach out to mums, rather than the onus always being on them to reach out to professionals. So I think, you know, if you have a friend who's just had a baby or a family member, we need to check in with them as well and say, how are you doing? And, you know, invariably everybody says, I'm fine the first time. So you need to ask them again, you know, how are you feeling? How do you know, in a really, because you know them best, particularly if they're a family member, you know, so if you feel that someone you know is struggling, don't just expect them always to reach out. We need to reach out to them as well. So it really needs to be a mixture of both.
Yeah, and the family members, they're in a position to offer practical support, which might be the first step that someone might be struggling mentally because they've not got the practical support. This is partly my when I've struggled mentally, it's because I'm trying to do too much practically as well, and it just tips the edge. And when you get that practical support, that actually answers the mental piece as well, because you've got someone loving you or taking care of you. Because we're mothering, and it's lovely to be mothered ourselves at the same time.
Oh yeah, isn't it? And
You don't stop needing being mothered.
exactly. And like tiny things which you may feel are insignificant when you're in that space as a new mum can feel massive.
Yeah.
Like somebody coming around and sorting out the laundry, or looking after baby so you can have a shower, or bringing you a hot meal. Things like that can be really invaluable, and can mean a lot when you're in the middle of it all as a new mum. I think particularly just with the make birth better stuff, if people are wondering whether it's about their birth experience or finding that difficult, we have on our website, we've got lots and lots of free crib sheets which can be really, really helpful, which people can print off and think about, can help sort of filter what am I experiencing, and then they can even print them off and take them to their GP or the health visitor, which can be really, really helpful for people as well. So they're there for everyone to access for free on the website.
It's a really great resource. I'll link to that as well. And you founded the birth trauma conference as well, that runs annually in London. Would you say a bit about that and what that is, and what that does?
Yeah, so I think it really started, so it's the 5th one is next year in January, and it really started from me myself looking to try and find some training myself, feeling I wanted to know as much as I could to be able to support women and their families. I just couldn't find anything that was out there. So I thought, well, you know what, I'll do an event and invite everybody that I know that's working in this field at the moment. So it really started sort of really organically, and it's just grown and grown and grown over the years. So we have a real mixture of people coming. This year we've got about 300 people booked to attend, which is brilliant. And that might be women with their own lived experience, researchers in the field, people just keen to know more about birth trauma and how to support families. And we have a mixture of people presenting research, people presenting their own experience. This year it's going to be some of the focus around creativity and motherhood. So we have some people doing an art workshop, a poetry workshop, people that have written about their experience, which really beautiful sort of poetry, for example. So it's a really, really good day because it's just a crowd of people that are really, really passionate. Everyone, it's open to anybody to attend. You can book the tickets via Eventbrite, and it's just something that has become really lovely part of the year to sort of bring everybody together. And it's a great space sometimes, I think, for people to build new networks as well, and know who's doing what, because I think we are increasingly learning more and more about birth trauma. It's more discussed, and there's a huge amount of new research going on, which is really, really good. Because I think historically, research into, say, post-traumatic stress disorder has not been linked specifically with birth trauma. So it's really good because it's allowing us to see specifically how women and men who are traumatized, what kind of symptoms they might present with, what works best in terms of treatment. So it's really, really good for, to be able to carry that knowledge forward and actually apply it to working with a family. So it's always a really, really good day. So everyone's, welcome to attend if they can.
And if there's anybody listening who, as they're hearing us discuss about birth trauma, thinks they may have actually had traumatic birth, maybe they didn't class it that way before, what would you suggest they start with doing to help themselves feel better?
Yeah. So I think, it can be really, trauma sometimes can feel like a really big word, but I think, if we think of your birth as some part of your birth as feeling really overwhelming and out of control and really frightening, and then probably what you're left with can be a whole host of symptoms. So it might be that you just can't stop thinking about your birth, that it's in your mind all the time, that you're replaying it, or you're having nightmares, or you feel very anxious and on edge all the time, that you're worried that something else bad is going to happen, or you feel very overprotective of baby, or you can't see anybody that's pregnant or talk about your birth story. If those kind of things are going on and they're there most of the day and most days of the week, then that's probably something that you could do with some support around. So usually it would mean going to see your GP or your health visitor. So try and pick a GP that, if you can, that you've always felt comfortable with, or that has an interest in perinatal mental health. A lot of places now have a perinatal GP champion in each surgery. So try and see them, because they should be more able to hear what you're saying. Or see your health visitor. If you can't speak it, write it down if you can, and take it and ask people to read it. And they should be able to, think with you about what's happening and possibly refer you on for some therapy. Many therapy services now, you can self-refer yourself in the NHS. You can look it up online and ring a number. There are lots of great helplines you can call. So Pandas has a helpline which is free. The Birth Trauma Association has a helpline that you can speak to, or look at Make Birth Better on the website and, have a think about, do I think this is really happening for me? In terms of healing from trauma, I think, for a lot of people, therapy is often really, really helpful, because it can help just explore what's happened and sort of make you feel like you're in control of your feelings rather than the other way around. But other things that can help is sort of peer support, peer groups, talking to people online. The Birth Trauma Association has a really good closed Facebook group, which can be really helpful for people. Exercise can help, really gentle exercise. Sometimes trauma is also held physically, not just mentally. We're often, during birth, I think we can feel that our bodies have failed us, or they've let us down, or we don't quite recognize this new body we have. We might have a cesarean scar. So sometimes things like massage or yoga, or things that connect you again with your body, with breathing, can also really, really help. But what it's about is, having that discussion with somebody who really understands trauma, so that they can outline for you all the different choices that exist in terms of healing. And then you can pick the ones that seem right for you. It's got to be unique. But there are 100 different, ways to heal. And I think it's really important to say that you will heal.
Yeah.
It will take time. Trauma can sometimes take time to process and to heal. And it's not about denying what's happened. It's just about reintegrating it into you and moving forward. But you can heal, you will heal, but you just need to give it some time and have the right treatment and support.
People that I know that have healed from anything like that, there's always that place afterwards where they feel strong again, confident again, and they like, oh, I got this from it, and then they know that they've been through this thing. It's like when you've had a good birth experience, you say, oh, I can do anything now, I can do that. But when you've had a bad one and you come out the other side, it's kind of similar. I can do anything, because I've lived those worst parts of my life where I didn't think I was going to get through it, and I have, and there's a way that'll fit for you, because there's a lot of choices that you're not aware of, because you've not been traumatized before, so you're not aware of the choices until you look. So it's
but also we know that at least half of women who have a traumatic birth report that they also have post-traumatic growth. So alongside negative symptoms, they also have this sense of growth. And often women will talk about, like what you've alluded to, that they feel this inner strength and resilience that they didn't know they had, but now can draw on that. or women will feel this new sense of purpose. And often actually women will go on to be absolutely amazing campaigners, or they will retrain, or they will be advocates for birth trauma. So for a lot of people, there are many, many positives as well as more difficult symptoms and feelings to deal with.
Yeah, I think it's so important that people know that they can be helped. Feel that you
Yeah,
can't when you're in the depth of it.
they absolutely can. And
And that there's people who want to help you out there, just connecting with them.
I mean, on the Make Birth Better website, we also have a map, an interactive map, so you can put in your postcode and it will link up to people that are birth trauma specialists close to you. Because I think sometimes the difficulty can be, I kind of know that something is not quite right, but I don't know what it is, and I don't know who's there to support me. So, that can be really, really helpful to think about who's around you. And lots of the therapists and practitioners that are listed there, they would be so happy just to chat through with you, and think with you about what might work for you. There's not going to be any fee or any charge. I have people contact me all the time, direct messaging me on Instagram or via my email saying, I live here and I just don't know what to do. And it's completely fine to do that, and we would just say, get in touch with this person or this person, and they would have a chat and think about what might be helpful for them. So, there are lots of people out there that are really willing and able to help. So don't be afraid to contact people at all.
One of your other campaigns, you've got a lot of wonderful campaigns, is the Every Word Counts campaign. So I know language is very important, and would you speak a little bit about the importance of language and every word counts?
Yeah, of course. So when we first started looking at Make Birth Better, we had lots and lots of stories from women, and we did an analysis of those stories, and it came up with 6 core values that women identified as something that they felt was vital during birth. And one of those was language, perhaps not, surprisingly. So we know that from when we talk to women and families, but also from the literature, that the way you're spoken to during your birth and your pregnancy and postnatally really, really matters, and that the words we use can be as harmful as they are healing. So it really, really matters how we speak to people. Women feeling included in conversations, not that they're being talked about, and also the choice of words that we use, the perception of how that might be to a woman when you're tired and in labour. So the Every Word Counts campaign was a campaign we ran on social media last year, where we asked women to give us phrases that had been said to them during their birth that were either very positive or very negative. And from that, we made a video, which you can still access on the website. And it was just unbelievably powerful. We had a huge response from women, and it just really highlighted those actually sometimes tiny differences in how something is said to you can either feel really terrible or really great. And some of the things that were said to women were quite astonishingly, shockingly awful, actually. And we had around 200 phrases, I think some of which I think lots of women, would recognize. So things like the sort of, we have to do this, you should do this, we are going to do this, rather than it being a collaborative thing of, could I suggest this, or could we think about this doing together, which in reality are tiny shifts, but when you're already feeling anxious, are the difference between walking away feeling traumatized or not. And so what we wanted to do was, to really use that going forward as part of training with people about how those tiny shifts can make a massive difference. And we use that, we show all the negative phrases and we show all the positive phrases. And really what we'd like is for, people working within the maternity system to have training around language and communication, and also to have ongoing training. So it's something that you come back to and learn from, and just check in about how you're doing, because often women are not being spoken to well during labour. You know, I think there's the classic of there being lots of people in the room and they're having a conversation about you, and you're lying there, but it's not with you. You're not included in that conversation, or using very medicalized words that then women don't really understand what that means. So they feel very frightened by that. Or, you know, I think the classic thing that everybody hates is sort of failure to progress or poor maternal effort, as though somehow you're not trying.
I've never heard the poor maternal effort before.
It's just
That's absolutely terrible.
It's just
As if you don't want to birth your baby, Ryan. I'm just gonna lie. That's really terrible.
I'm just really not going to try. I mean, I had poor maternal effort on my discharge summary from my first birth. So that was my daughter, where I was in labour for 40 hours and didn't have, by the time she was born, had not slept for 3 days. In fact, actually, they hadn't even offered me any food during that entire time. So I was absolutely exhausted. And to then be told that I was doing a poor effort was not received very well by me.
No.
You know, and I think these things really, really matter, because, you know, I had heard of that term before and could kind of just think, yeah, fine. But if you'd never heard of that term before, you know, imagine how that feels to be told that it was your poor effort. So these things are really, really important. I think often it's about the disconnect, you know, in language between what is said and what you hear. So it should always be about checking in with women, you know, have you understood how I've explained to you? Do you want to ask any questions? Does that make sense? That's something I say to women all the time. Have what I've said to you made sense to you? Do you want me to explain it in a different way? Because, you know, sometimes women don't have English as their first language. Sometimes women, you know, there are all kinds of different ways why language needs to be at the heart of what we're doing. So I think, you know, I was really not surprised that that came up as one of the sort of 6 core values, because it really matters. And actually it's something that, you know, doesn't cost us anything. It's something that we should be able to do well for people. But it was a really, I think, a really important campaign. And I think, you know, really shocking that so many women were, the language that was being used for so many women. And this was last year, it wasn't 10 years ago. Yeah.
So if you have a woman now preparing to give birth, knowing that although it's an ongoing thing to improve that, they might get these kind of phrases, what would you suggest they do to prepare so that they can not have that affect them negatively? What would you suggest to somebody to help them?
Yeah, so I think you need to involve your partner as well in these discussions. So, you know, you both need to be advocates for each other through birth. So I think don't be afraid ever to challenge a professional, you know, to ask, you know, why are you doing that now? What's the benefits? What's the risks? What happens if we don't do anything? You know, to ask questions. Feel any good clinician should be open to you asking questions. So it's your experience. So don't be afraid to ask why people are doing things. Don't be afraid to challenge people if you're not sure what's happening. Ask for it to be re-explained. You know, this is perhaps a role that your partner can take on. And don't be afraid to challenge somebody if you think what they've said is poor, or you're not getting the right care. And I think read as much as you can about, you know, be informed about your choices for pain control, your choices for where you give birth, your choices for what you might like to happen. You know, try and think of it as preferences rather than plans, and to accept that birth is by nature unpredictable. So of course have things that you would like to happen, but I think try to hold in mind that sometimes with the best will in the world, they can't happen. And that if something else changed, you know, what do you still want to make you feel in control, to make you feel safe, to make you feel that you're being respected? So I think it's trying to do as much of that as possible, but absolutely do not be afraid to ask questions or to challenge somebody if you feel that the care they're providing is not respectful for you. And I think that's something that a partner can do really well, because, you know, as the mum giving birth, you're perhaps sometimes so in your own zone, you know, or your space, that sometimes you really need your partner or whoever's with you in the room to be monitoring everything else for you.
Yeah, definitely. You don't want to be talking in labour.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. Are the other values on your website as well? The other 5, you mentioned 6.
Yeah, so they're all on the website, but you know, there are things like safety, consent obviously is a huge issue. A lot of women feel traumatized because they don't feel they were consented properly for, say, medical procedures, or didn't really have an informed understanding of what different things meant. I think the other huge one is kindness, which we sort of alluded to before. And time again, I hear from women that that's what they felt was missing from their birth experience, was somebody just being kind. And I think kindness is something that matters very, very much. That ability of somebody to make you feel that they are absolutely there for you and with you. And little things like human touch, like, you know, holding somebody's hand, really making them feel that you are absolutely with them and there to support them in whatever way they need. And I think, again, that comes back to the sort of trauma within systems, is that we know that within midwives and obstetricians, there are record numbers of people being affected with stress and burnout and compassion fatigue, and record numbers of midwives and obstetricians actually leaving the system. So I think what happens there is that you get people that are at work that are just about able to practically do their job, but they don't have anything left to give emotionally. So you lose the kindness in the space. And I think that's very much what's happening in the system. And what needs to happen is that we need to look after our frontline staff and support them much, much better, because they are amazing. You know, everybody that works within the NHS on the whole, you know, is a huge resource to be cherished. But I think what we don't do is look after our teams very well at work, and then that impacts the care they're able to give to women and their families.
Kindness is a great value.
Mm.
And what would be your vision for the future of birth and motherhood? If you could magically wave a wand.
That's a really easy question.
Oh, good. Everyone says it's a big question, but I like easy.
I mean, it's got to start with the system itself. So we've, you know, I would want more of everything. I'm greedy. So I want, you know, more midwives, more obstetricians, more continuity of care, so that everybody has a named midwife who looks after them at every stage of their journey, including birth. So you have that person that you have this lovely relationship with, you don't feel frightened to ask questions of. And you have teams working in the NHS that are really well supported, so they feel absolutely valued, so they're able to provide really great emotional care. So those teams have enough people on the team, they have time to take breaks at work, so they have a proper lunch break where they eat some proper food, that they have reflective practice so that they're able to process what they're seeing and doing on a daily basis, so that when they come to work, every woman that passes through that system is provided with the best trauma informed care. And then I would have women having extended antenatal education that includes postnatal planning, so that they've really understood how unpredictable birth can be and been able to ask questions about all the different types of birth that exist and what might support them through that birth experience. And that includes partners as well, so that they feel fully involved. And then postnatally, I would have a midwifery support for all women that goes for much, much longer and has extended contacts with the woman at home, so that they don't have to go anywhere, so that they have loads of support around those early days, feeding, bonding, connecting, and that includes the dad. So it's a family approach, not just a maternal approach. And then I would have training for all GPs and health visitors in birth trauma so that they can confidently assess it and diagnose it and know where to refer to. And then I'd have thousands more therapists working across the country so that women can all access support really, really quickly. They don't have to wait. They can get support local to where they live really, really quickly, and so that they can heal really, really quickly as well. So not much. I'm not asking for much.
I think we should be asking for more, though.
Yeah,
We
I
haven't,
mean,
historically as women, we haven't really asked for what we want and need or enough, and we still don't. This is my big thing of the last 6 months, to, just asking for more time, more space. And to me, then it feels like a lot that I'm asking for, but when I really put it in perspective, it's not. And
no.
so what you're asking for might sound like a lot in comparison, or people might go, well, how are we going to do that? That's all very well and good. How are we going to do that? But that's not the point of the vision. The vision is to have, this is what we want. Now how, and then how do we get it? That's just the steps along the way. But to have the vision, there's no point aiming halfway and say, well, we'll have a few more midwives, but still have a hole in the system. That isn't a great vision, is it? So, the vision is aim big, aim for what we really want and deserve, and it will serve everyone to have the big vision. And then how can we put that in place? How can we start with our individual step towards that vision each? And you've done it.
But also so much of, particularly within healthcare, it's often sort of very short-sighted, and if you actually look at the long-term implications of women struggling with trauma, the cost to society is absolutely massive, but the cost of what could solve that is tiny in comparison. And when we look at women with untreated perinatal mental illness, actually 2/3 of the cost is borne by their child, so it impacts another person's whole life duration. So in terms of what we need to do to address this, actually is so little compared to the costs of what we're already paying as a society. And if for example you think about the cost of supporting teams properly in the NHS, it's far less than the amount we pay in sick leave per year in agency staff. So in reality, the costs are really small compared to what we're already paying.
Yeah, that's really helpful to put things in perspective. Thank you. So if there was one thing you'd like every woman listening to this interview to take away, to take action on, what would that be?
I suppose to know that everybody's mood and emotions and feelings feels different during pregnancy, during birth, after birth, and not to be afraid to ask for help, not to be afraid to tell somebody if you're struggling, and to know that there are people out there whose whole aim is to support, not to judge. Please, please, if you feel you're struggling, don't be afraid to reach out and seek support.
Thank you. Thank you. That's really beautiful, and I'll be sure to put all the links to all the resources that are available. That was when I was first pregnant, I didn't know any of the resources or simple things.
Yeah, no, that can make a real difference, just knowing where to go.
Yeah. So I'll put those links up when the interview goes live. So thank you so much for your time today.
No, it's been great.
For your work in the world. And I like to see all these, because I'm asking everyone what their vision is. So there's some great vision questing going on. So I'm looking forward to see that come into within my lifetime, coming into being.
No,
So,
and I think it will. It will.
Mm.
It is changing. It's not as quick as obviously I would want for somebody who's struggling today, but in terms of where we were in knowing about perinatal mental health, in the services that are available, compared to where we were when I first started, things have changed amazingly. And the long-term NHS plan is coming in next year, so there's more funding to extend support up to 2 years postnatally, to more involved fathers. So things are moving in the right direction. But I think I completely agree. I think we need to be bold in what we ask for. We need to ask for everything that we want, and that will really get us to where we want to be.
And that goes for if you're in pregnancy wanting the care that you're not getting, as well as the profession itself wanting to change. We all need to ask what we want. Yeah. So thank you so much for your time today. And